Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review Netflix's new film, Outlaw King. And this film is about Robert the Bruce and has connections to the film Braveheart, as both these films are taking influence from historical events around the same time, including the freedom fighting in Scotland against King Edward. And this film is starring Chris Pine as Robert the Bruce, and is for the most part about him and him becoming an outlaw and leading Scottish rebels up against the British Crown. And this film is directed by David Mackenzie, who I loved his film Hell or High Water. One of my favorite films the last couple years. Really stuck out to me as something that I thought was incredibly made and should have gotten a lot more attention than it did. I was very excited when I found out that Mackenzie was going to be directing this film, and then I found out it was from Netflix. And I'm trying not to have an attitude towards like it's a Netflix film, it's not going to be of the same quality, but in general most of the Netflix films are not very strong, and a lot of them turn out to be not so great films. And this film was made specifically for Netflix. I kind of wish I did get to see this in an actual cinema, because it is a historical epic. It has some scope to it, and I really wish that would have been able to actually see that up on the screen. But in terms of this film, I feel like the pacing was well done, and Mackenzie is able to run this story through, because most historical epics you expect to be 2.5 hours, 3 hours long. This film is trimmed down to a 2-hour mark and really keeps moving forward, driving the story forward. And in terms of making the audience feel, there's intense moments, there's scenes where you really do feel for the characters and you build these connections. And overall, I think it is a well put together film, and I think Mackenzie does a decent job. There are some parts where it's like the CGI isn't the greatest, and because you can tell this wasn't made for like the biggest of budgets, and like it's made on Netflix, and in terms of some of those special effects weren't up to snuff. But in terms of this film, it's really good. Like, it's beautiful to look at. The cinematography in this film is really well done. It's very strong, and which made me want to be able to watch this on the big screen. Now, I don't feel like this film captured as much of the scope as, say, a Braveheart, from how it used landscape shots or scenes where it's like William Wallace is running across the top of mountains. This does feel a lot smaller and dirtier, but this film is gritty. It really does show like the guts and blood and everything of what it's supposed to be showing, to the point where it's like the closing fight in this film, the big battle, is very gritty and realistic, but there are parts where it takes away because of like the CGI and stuff like that wasn't the strongest. But in terms of this film, I feel like that really worked. In terms of the writing, which the film was written by Bathsheba Duran, and I feel like the story starts off very strong and building this very interesting character of Robert the Bruce. You see his honor and what's driving him in terms of being a leader, and him growing this relationship and respect for his arranged marriage with Rebecca Robin's character, who becomes his wife. And I feel like those two have very strong relationship, and you see it build. Now, in terms of the runtime of this film, I feel like there are some aspects where they could have spent a little bit more time of building things, and maybe that relationship could have been one of them. But I feel like their chemistry between Robin and Chris Pine is very strong in terms of on-screen chemistry, and you can really feel it. And that makes it a lot easier for us to buy into their relationship. And this film does take a bit of time building up to the point where Robert the Bruce becomes a rebel, and we get to where he starts fighting back. And I feel like the film benefits from that aspect of being able to take its time and really building towards that. And the story, though, it's balancing some different threads. Aaron Taylor Johnson's character in this film, he is set off on his own quest. He has his own motivations, and he is somebody to watch in this film. He really stands out as an intense performance and a character that really sticks out. And there's parts where you really focus on him, and then you really focus on Stephen Delane, King Edward the First of England, and Billy Howell, his son. And you really get parts of theirs, and you see their motivations, what's drawing them. Billy Howell's character can be a little cartoonish at points. I feel like he's trying a little bit too hard to be the Commodus of this film, like in Gladiator. But I think that towards the second half of this film, they spend so much time with these other aspects, you kind of forget Robert the Bruce. And up until the very, like, the end battle scene, you really don't get that focus back on him. And I feel like that's a weak part of this film, where it doesn't really hold the focus on the main character. And you forget him for a while, and he becomes less of an interesting protagonist as you get towards the end, because you've felt like you've lost some of the connection with him, and the story has gone astray. And there's moments where it's like, and then boom, something happens, and there might have been some pieces missing in this film, or a little bit more build. And those are some of the detractions that I saw in this film. I think the music was well done, the cinematography was well done, and the acting. I think Chris Pine did a fine job. Does he leave a lasting impression? It's like, oh, that was a great performance. No, he does a really good job with this. His natural charisma he brings to this film, and he does the job well. Stephen Delane, who I wasn't the hugest fan of Stannis Baratheon in Game of Thrones, because I felt like he was one of the least interesting characters in that show, but he does a fine job in this. And Rebecca Robin, who plays his wife, plays Robert the Bruce's wife, I think does a really, really good job, and she stands out in this film. And then you have Billy Howell, who plays Edward II, and I feel like he's slimy, and he brings enough to his role that he is memorable. And Aaron Taylor Johnson, as I mentioned before, is very strong, very driven, intense performance. Overall, I think this film is definitely something to take the time to check out on Netflix. I wish I could have seen it in theaters, because I felt like it would have played better that way, especially on a big screen. But overall, I think this is above average film, above average historical drama, historical epic. If you feel like you're the kind of moviegoer that enjoys films like Braveheart and Gladiator and Troy, this is something that I think is worth checking out. Overall, it's a Netflix thing. It's 2 hours. It's easy to access. I don't think it's something that's like, it's not worth the time. It's there. Take advantage of it. Check it out and comment. Let me know what you think. And thank you, as always, for checking in with your Wasteland Reviewer.